Imagine a person sitting at a modern glass desk, typing rapidly on a sleek, high-end laptop while navigating complex digital software with ease. Suddenly, the office phone rings. The person reaches for a physical notepad and a ballpoint pen, their posture shifting into a rigid, formal stance. The way they speak changes completely. The fluid, casual digital native disappears, replaced by a person who sounds like they are living in 1985. This is the Xennial bridge. It is a rare psychological architecture found in those born during the brief transition from analog to digital worlds. These individuals do not just have different skills. They possess two distinct neurological operating systems that switch on and off depending on their environment. One system is rooted in the tactile, slow, and linear world of paper. The other is wired for the instant, fractured, and infinite digital. Most people assume this is just a matter of being tech-savvy. However, the mechanism is much deeper than learning how to use a new app. It is a form of cognitive code switching. The brain literally reconfigures its perception of time, social hierarchy, and problem-solving based on the current medium. This creates a split personality. One side of the self is patient and hierarchical, while the other is impulsive and flatly connected to everyone. The Xennial does not choose which version of themselves to use. The environment triggers the switch automatically, often without the person even noticing the change. We are looking at a unique generation of human translators. They are the only ones who can truly speak two completely different psychological languages fluently. To understand why this happens, we must look at how the brain was originally wired during a very specific window of human history. A child sits on a carpeted floor in a quiet living room. They are holding a heavy, printed encyclopedia, turning the thick, physical pages carefully. The room is silent except for the ticking of a wall clock. To find information about space, the child must follow a strict, alphabetical order. There are no shortcuts. There are no hyperlinks. The child's brain is learning that information is a physical destination that requires a slow, linear journey. This is the first personality being built. It is an analog foundation. It rewards deep focus, physical patience, and a respect for authoritative, finished sources. The brain develops a high threshold for boredom. It expects a delay between a question and an answer, creating a neural pathway for reflective, internal thought. A few years later, the same child is a teenager. They are sitting in the same room, but now they are staring at a glowing screen. The dial-up modem makes a screeching sound. Suddenly, the world is no longer a physical book. It is a shimmering, interconnected web of instant data. The teenager clicks a link, then another. The brain, which was once satisfied with one page for an hour, is now receiving rapid-fire hits of dopamine. This is the second personality being born. It is the digital layer. It learns that information is fluid, infinite, and requires zero physical movement to access. The Xennial brain was not born into one or the other. It was caught in the exact moment the human experience shifted from physical to virtual. Because the analog foundation was already finished, the digital layer had to be built on top of it, rather than replacing it entirely. The brain learned to associate physical objects with the slow self and glowing screens with the fast self. These are two different neural maps. One map prioritizes the physical weight of reality. The other map prioritizes the speed of the signal. Both exist in the same skull simultaneously. This conditioning creates a brain that is permanently bifurcated. It is a biological archive of the greatest technological shift in history, stored in human behavior. How these two systems interact in adulthood reveals a pattern of automation that dictates every social interaction and work task the Xennial performs. If this is already making sense to you, it means you're starting to notice patterns most people never see. Subscribe, and let's keep exploring how the mind really works. Now, this is where things start to get uncomfortable. An adult sits in a high-pressure board meeting. They are holding a heavy fountain pen and a leather-bound notebook, listening to a presentation. Their breathing is slow. Their eyes follow the speaker with a traditional, respectful focus that feels grounded in a much older, more formal era. The person beside them whispers a question about a data point. Without breaking their physical composure, the adult reaches for a hidden smartphone. Their thumb blurs across the glass. In 4 seconds, they have navigated 3 apps, verified a complex statistic, and sent a silent, encrypted message. The transition is invisible. The analog self remains seated in the chair, while the digital self has already traveled across a global network. This is the mechanism of automated switching. The brain does not pause to decide which version of the self is required for the task. The physical presence of paper triggers the deep focus circuit. The tactile sensation of the glass screen triggers the rapid processing circuit. Awareness lags behind execution. The Xennial often realizes they have switched modes only after the digital task is finished and the phone is away. The brain has mapped specific motor movements to specific psychological states. Flipping a page invokes a different neurochemistry than scrolling a news feed. One state is characterized by a high tolerance for ambiguity. The other state demands immediate resolution and constant, microdoses of new, incoming information. The two systems run in parallel, like two different computer programs sharing the same processor but never actually merging into a single piece of software. This creates a unique cognitive friction. The individual feels a constant, underlying tension between the desire to linger and the impulse to accelerate. The brain is constantly negotiating between these two poles. It seeks the payoff of the slow build while craving the hit of the instant. Understanding this tension requires looking at why the brain refuses to let go of either system, even when they seem to conflict. A person stands in a kitchen. They are following a recipe from an old, stained index card while a podcast plays loudly from a speaker. The index card represents a fixed, unchanging reality. The podcast represents a fluid, endless stream of data that could be updated at any moment. The brain feels a deep sense of security from the card. It provides a neurological anchor in a world that feels increasingly unmoored and digital. However, the brain also feels a surge of power from the podcast. It provides a sense of omniscience, the feeling of being everywhere at once. The payoff for the analog self is stability. It satisfies the primal need for a physical environment that is predictable, slow, and tangibly real. The payoff for the digital self is agency. It satisfies the modern need for speed, connectivity, and the ability to manipulate information instantly. If the brain abandoned the analog, it would lose its sense of historical weight. It would feel ungrounded, drifting in a sea of ephemeral data. If the brain abandoned the digital, it would lose its competitive edge. It would feel obsolete, disconnected from the rapid pulse of the modern world. The brain maintains both because they serve different survival needs. One provides the roots of identity, while the other provides the wings of utility. This duality is a defense mechanism. It allows the individual to navigate two different social hierarchies, the traditional corporate ladder and the flat, digital network. If you've noticed this pattern in your own life, describe the moment it became clear. Someone reading may recognize themselves. The brain is essentially running a hybrid engine. It switches fuel sources depending on whether it needs the torque of focus or the speed of light. This maintenance of two distinct personalities is not a choice, but a biological adaptation to a world that changed too fast for one mind. The true complexity emerges when these two functional systems solidify into a single, permanent identity that defines how the individual sees themselves. A manager stands before a team of younger employees. They are explaining a complex project using a whiteboard and a physical marker. Their movements are deliberate. They value the slow build of an idea, drawing connections with a steady hand that suggests a deep, analog authority. Later, the same manager sits alone. They open a chat window and begin typing in short, fragmented bursts, using emojis and rapid-fire digital shorthand. The team sees two different people. One is the sage who respects the process. The other is the hacker who demands instant results. This is the solidification of the dual identity. The Xennial begins to identify as the bridge between two worlds, a necessary translator for everyone. Social reinforcement fuels this. Older generations praise their professionalism and focus. Younger generations praise their tech fluency and adaptability. The brain receives positive feedback from both sides of the divide. It learns that being split is actually a social and professional superpower. This reinforcement causes the two personalities to harden. The individual no longer feels like they are acting. They feel like they are both people. They become the person who still buys physical books, but reads them while their phone glows on the nightstand. constantly vibrating with notifications. The identity is built on this paradox. They are the only ones who feel a phantom limb sensation for a world that no longer exists. They remember the silence of the pre-internet era. That memory acts as a permanent psychological filter through which they view the modern, noisy world. The analog self becomes the moral compass. It provides a sense of ethics and boundaries that feel rooted in a more tangible, physical reality. The digital self becomes the survival suit. It provides the tools and the speed necessary to navigate a landscape that never stops moving. This role solidification creates a person who is perpetually bicultural. They live in a digital present but think in an analog past. As this identity settles, it begins to warp the very way the individual perceives reality, filtering every experience through two different lenses. A person walks into a crowded coffee shop. They immediately notice the physical layout, the smell of the beans, and the weight of the door. This is the analog filter. It registers the sensory, the local, and the immediate. It sees the coffee shop as a physical destination for focus. Simultaneously, their brain scans for the Wi-Fi password and the proximity of power outlets. They are checking their digital status in the room. This is the digital filter. It registers the invisible networks and the potential for connectivity. It sees the shop as a node in a cloud. Reality is never a single stream for the Xennial. It is a dual-layered experience, like a movie with two different soundtracks playing at once. They perceive time as both a slow, ticking clock and a fast, refreshing feed. This creates a chronic sense of time sickness or internal rushing. When they look at a beautiful sunset, one part of the brain wants to sit in the silence and simply watch the light fade away. The other part of the brain is already framing the shot for a digital archive, calculating the value of the moment in a social network. The mechanism is a constant, internal tug-of-war. The brain is trying to decide if the moment belongs to the real world or the virtual one. If you've noticed this pattern in your own life, describe the moment it became clear. Someone reading may recognize themselves. This dual perception makes the Xennial uniquely sensitive to friction. They feel the lag in a computer more acutely than those born before them. They also feel the shallowness of the digital world more painfully than those born after them, because they have a physical baseline for comparison. The brain is trapped in a state of permanent comparison. It is always measuring the digital map against the analog territory and finding gaps. Understanding this dual perception is the first step towards seeing how awareness of the mechanism begins to change the internal experience. The individual sits in a park, observing a group of teenagers filming a viral dance. They feel a familiar, sharp, judgmental impulse. Their analog self sees a lack of presence and a performance for an invisible audience. It feels like a loss of real life. Then, the digital self activates. It recognizes the creative editing, the global reach, and the technical skill required to produce the short video. Awareness does not stop the switch. It simply illuminates the moment the internal gears grind against each other during the transition. The Xennial begins to see the phantom nature of their own reactions. They realize their anger at technology is actually a defense of the past. They realize their obsession with speed is a fear of being left behind by a future that feels increasingly alien and cold. This awareness is a shift in perspective only. It does not delete the digital layer, nor does it return the brain to its original state. The brain remains a dual processor. However, the observer is now watching the process. They see the code running beneath their own emotional responses. They notice how a physical book feels like a safe house for their attention. They see how a smartphone feels like a cockpit for their ego. This insight creates a strange, quiet distance. The individual is no longer fully immersed in either world. They are a ghost in both machines. They see the seams in reality. They notice when a social interaction is being shaped by an algorithm rather than a human connection. They notice when their own silence is being treated as a void that must be filled with a digital signal or a notification. Awareness reveals that the split is not a brokenness to be fixed. It is a structural feature of their specific neurological development. This perspective shift prepares the brain for a new kind of existence, one where the loop of switching continues, but without the old confusion. Late at night, the house is still. The person lies in bed, the blue light of a tablet illuminating their face in the dark. They are reading a long-form article about history. The content is analog in spirit, deep, complex, and requiring a slow, steady mental pace. But the medium is digital. Their thumb flickers, scrolling through the text at a speed that contradicts the depth of the information provided. The loop is active. The deep focus brain is trying to digest the ideas, while the rapid processing brain is trying to finish the task. They are aware of the friction. They feel the physical tension in their neck and the mental buzz of the high-frequency digital signal. They do not put the tablet away to find a physical book. They do not close their eyes to embrace the analog silence of the room. The mechanism continues to run. The brain is habituated to this specific tension. It has become its natural, baseline state of being. The Xennial lives in this quiet, permanent loop. They are always plugging in to disconnect and disconnecting to find a sense of true reality. There is no final resolution. The analog foundation cannot be erased, and the digital layer cannot be uninstalled from the neural hardware. The awareness of the loop becomes part of the loop itself. The observer watches the switcher, who watches the screen, who remembers the paper. The person acknowledges the duality without a need for a cure. They are a bridge that is constantly being crossed by two different versions of themselves. The tension remains, but it is now a known frequency. It is the hum of a machine that never quite powers down or stays fully on. This constant negotiation between the tactile past and the virtual future is the defining rhythm of their psychological life. As the loop continues, it leads toward a final confrontation with the core of their identity, the mirror that reflects the split. A person stands before a mirror in a dimly lit bathroom, holding a traditional safety razor while a digital smart mirror displays the morning headlines. They watch their own reflection. The eyes looking back are those of a person who remembers the taste of postage stamp glue and the sound of a rotary dial. Yet, those same eyes are currently scanning a scrolling feed of global data, processing information at a speed that would have been unthinkable in their childhood. This is the moment of identity confrontation. The individual sees that they are not a single, unified self, but a complex, biological transition point. The mirror reveals the Xennial mask. It is a face that can mimic the stoicism of the silent generation and the frantic agility of the digital native. They realize that their authentic self is actually the friction between the two. They are the space where the physical world meets the virtual simulation. There is no instruction on how to merge these halves. To merge them would be to destroy the very mechanism that allows them to function in modern society. The psychological insight is a heavy, lingering weight. They are the last humans who will ever truly understand the profound before and the infinite after. They see that their brain is a museum of a lost civilization and a laboratory for a new one, existing in a state of permanent, quiet conflict. The mirror does not offer a solution. It only reflects the reality of a mind that is forever divided by the timing of its own birth. This realization does not bring peace, but a sharp, clear understanding of why they always feel like a stranger in every room they enter. They are the only ones who can see the invisible digital wires that now wrap around every physical object, connecting the tangible to the ephemeral. The confrontation ends not with a change in behavior, but with the stark acceptance of a neurological architecture that can never be made whole. The screen fades to a soft, neutral gray. The hum of the digital world remains, a constant background radiation that never truly disappears from the modern mind. The Xennial bridge remains open. The mechanism of the dual personality continues to switch, driven by the environment, the tools, and the deep, early conditioning. There is no path back to the pure analog world of the encyclopedia, and there is no complete immersion into the digital world without a sense of loss. The loop stays open. The brain continues to measure every pixel against every grain of paper, perpetually caught in the middle of a human evolution. Understanding the mechanism does not stop it from operating. It only changes the way the individual experiences the inevitable tension of their own internal architecture. You are the witness to your own bifurcation. You are the observer of a psychological split that was mandated by the very history you lived through. If you find yourself searching for a way to fix this division, you are looking for a solution to a permanent, structural reality of your development. The system is functioning exactly as it was designed to. It is the biological response to a world that shifted beneath your feet while you were growing. At SciHow, we don't look for ways to change the system. We simply look at how the system is built, revealing the hidden machinery of the self. By seeing the mechanism, you see the how of your own behavior. The rest remains as it always was, a quiet, automated process running in the dark. If this exposure of the internal architecture has shifted your perspective, consider following the trail of these psychological breakdowns as we reveal more hidden loops. The door to the analog past is closed, and the digital future is already here. You are simply the one standing in the doorway, watching both sides.